Just walk me through the clear differences between the American dream and the rest of the world.
There is this mindset of like anything is possible. I think when I come to Europe, I feel like there is just a lot of, like I'm jumping through a million hoops just to get one thing done. And then there's the other side of it, consumerism. So anything you launch in the US, there's a market for it. And here, that's the issue.
Entrepreneurship can make women more masculine, you know, because of the stuff you have to go through to get to the level you get to, and it can harden you up a little bit.
It chips away at the nurturing side of us.
Nothing's annoyed me more though over the last few years, and I've seen some of the Miss US states pick a bloke in drag to win. When a woman's not even winning a woman's competition, that is like too far.
There was a meme going around, it's like, I went to a funeral this weekend. Here's 5 things I learned about sales from my experience.
LinkedIn wankers, right? And this is where a guy goes on LinkedIn and he'll write a whole story post about how he gave to a woman in the street, or how he gave an opportunity of a job to this. It's all just like, it's proper wanky.
Everything that you lose makes space for everything that you need. And I think that the reason why most of us are held back is because we have some kind of fear, like fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss. But just remember that whatever you lose, you didn't lose. It's just actually making room and creating space for the thing that you actually need.
I had to make a decision, and the decision was like, what I'm about to say to this woman, she's either going to hate me or... Man, we are here again, back on the show. I mean, just to give a bit of context as to why I've said that is because obviously we recorded an episode, and I think so much has changed since we recorded about a week ago that I wanted to get you back here and do this episode again to do it to full justice. But if we were to break down your life, obviously you've had a very eventful life. You're going from, you know, Morocco to the US and change your life and getting involved in AI and modeling and everything else in between. Give me a bit of an insight into growing up in Morocco and what that was like for you.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me again. I know we got a lot deeper last time, but we didn't have enough time, so I'm excited about this conversation today. Growing up in Morocco, I mean, it was very comfortable. I know not many people have an idea of, you know, what it's like to grow up in a third world country, or just especially for young women who are really, really ambitious. I think for me, it was a very interesting and nurturing environment that my mom and my dad have created for us. I never thought I would ever leave Morocco because we had a very comfortable life. And I think for me, the idea of immigrating to another country really felt like it was for people who were looking for a better life. And we had everything we wanted. My parents were very successful. They built an amazing life for themselves and for us. We went to private schools. I think it was a very, very great childhood. I will say, because it was so comfortable back then, for me, I wasn't as ambitious as I am today. I don't think I had a chip on my shoulder. I was a little too spoiled, just growing up a little bit more upper class there. And the transition from Morocco to the US was probably what changed my whole kind of perception of life and my whole personality as well. And I feel like the woman I am today was because of that transition from Morocco to the US, because it was so hard on me at the time being a teenager.
Yeah, I think your mum and dad had to give up a lot in that transition as well, because they were doing, I think if I'm correct, if I'm right, but they had their own businesses, they were doing well. I think your dad was high up in a corporate job, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And then they've given all that up, and then he ends up working in shops and stuff like that to create a better life for you.
Yes.
But what was that like, seeing your mum and dad change from being corporates and high up in their own environments, owning their own businesses, to then, changing that whole role set,
And usually I get emotional when I talk about this part, because I know how deeply, I wouldn't say traumatizing, I feel that's a little too harsh of a word, but I know it affected me a lot, because I felt so much guilt around the fact that our parents had to give up so much of what they've worked on, had to sacrifice an amazing, successful, comfortable life, and then come with us to the US just for us to be comfortable there, to chase the American dream. But then in that process, they had to downgrade a lot of their lifestyle, a lot of their career aspirations. So my dad was CEO of 2 major companies in Morocco when he moved to the US, because it took a while for the degrees to translate. I don't know, there's a whole process there. they had to take on very, very low paying jobs. And watching that for me was very difficult because, again, I carried a lot of that guilt. I then had to step up and kind of be the grown up in the house because they also didn't speak English. I, of all of us, was the only one who took English in high school and was able to communicate. So I felt like I had to just grow up really fast in that transition and really be more supportive of them as well, translate a lot of the things we had to do, and really be there for them too as a support element versus relying on them like I did when I was in Morocco. But that sacrifice, I think, for me was, again, it is still today the driving force behind everything that I do. And I remember just thinking, my parents sacrificed all of their lives and situations for us. I can't just be average. They didn't bring us all the way here for me to do the bare minimum and just live an average life. And that's kind of what keeps me going every day. And just to make sure that they're proud of that decision.
What did your mum and dad say to you when they were preparing to go to the US back in Morocco?
It was very sudden for us. I know they've been preparing for it for a while, of course, being the adults, but they didn't really talk to us about it until it was said and done. And it was almost a very casual dinner conversation. I remember we just kind of were having dinner one night and then they said, so listen, I was 2 years away from graduating high school and then going to college in Europe, typically because I went to a French school. So if I stayed in a French school, I would do what all of my friends did and go to school somewhere in Europe. My brother was in middle school still, so he wasn't really too much part of the conversation. But I remember they said, look, we made a decision that we're going to all move to the U.S. And up until then, I've never been to the U.S. I didn't know anything about America. I didn't speak, actually failed English in high school there. So it was very sudden, but also surprising. And at the time being, 13, 14, I didn't really understand why we would even make that decision. In hindsight, now I feel like that's the best decision we've ever made. But I definitely felt a little bit of resentment at the time, thinking, why would you take me away from my culture, from my family? I'm just finally making friends with the popular kids in high school. Like, why now I have to go back and start over in a country that I've never been to, that I don't know anything about the culture? I've only seen some American movies here and there. The high school drama did not feel like somewhere I wanted to be. So it was very foreign for me. But it wasn't up for discussion. So it was a decision that they've already made, and I kind of had to go along with it. And that process, too, of getting ready to leave and move was probably the most draining for my parents and for myself. We had to move out of our house, get into an apartment. We had to take all these tests and basically spend every other week at the embassy. And it was a lot of paperwork that we had to go through. And I just remember at the time, I'm like, why would we do this? Why are we doing this? Like, what is the point of it?
I changed countries and obviously went from the UK at 26 years old and moved to Australia. And I honestly felt for the first 2 years of being in Australia and becoming a resident and all that kind of stuff that you feel so out of depth. So you don't really have the friends. You don't feel like you're at home. You're getting homesick from your old life. And it's so easy to just turn around and like potentially fly back to the normal. Mm-hmm. How did your family manage that feeling? Because I'm sure you went through the same, right?
We definitely went through a lot of that. But I think one thing that's good about my family, maybe good or bad, I don't know, blessing and a curse, is that we're very good at managing emotions and not showing it. And my parents especially are very good at that, which I do appreciate because I think that's also what creates this very peaceful, neutral environment in our household. So at least for me, I've never seen my parents stressed throughout that whole process. And that really is something I admire so much about them, is how they're able to really manage their emotions and manage stressful situations so that it doesn't affect us. I think had I seen them under more stress and, if I ever see my mom cry about it or complain about it or really, express how much she hated or didn't want to go through that process, I think I would have actually more guilt and I would have absorbed a lot of that. But because of how they handled it and they set that tone of, we can do this. It's not that hard. We're going to just take it day by day. We're going to learn the steps. We're going to explore the culture. We're going to get adapted. It's not a big deal. And that helped me really integrate a lot quicker than I initially anticipated. I had my moments where I felt alone because I also felt like I couldn't go complain to them about my new life and how I didn't feel like I fit in right away. My brother was too young, so he was kind of just, living his own part of it and just enjoying the process. And then for me, I felt like even though I had a lot of friends that I made, moving to Colorado in high school there, I came home and it just felt like this nostalgic feeling that I had nobody to talk to about. And that's actually where I started writing a lot. So I started journaling a lot because that was the only way of expressing what I was feeling and maybe processing it. I did have a period of time where I went through a mild depression. And again, writing helped me a lot. I had a counselor that really helped me also process a lot of it in high school. So we each dealt with it separately, but we never brought it home. And that's one thing I really love about how I grew up and how my household was structured, is that no matter what you're going through, you always come home and stay strong so that you don't affect that whole energy at home. Because if you bring the stress back home every time, it just creates this kind of like, unhomey feeling. And so my parents were very good at really setting that tone.
Quick one for you guys. If you're loving this conversation and you're getting immense value, consider hitting that subscribe button and turn the notification bells on, as it lets us know that we're creating the right content for you at the right time.
So that was kind of an unwritten rule within the family then?
Yeah, and up until this day. And that's also why when I pick the people that I want to be around, a lot of it is, are they complaining all the time? Do they bring stress from work back home? Are they always ungrateful? Is every little stress point or every little problem becomes a mountain? Because it's all about perspective. And I think what I learned from my parents and what I learned from this transition, although it was very hard on us, is that we really chose to control our perspective on it and see it as an amazing opportunity that we can get through all together, and that at least we had each other as a family there. We were all going through it together, and that we were very supportive, instead of seeing it as, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I feel far from home. I feel like I don't really fit in. I feel like I don't understand the culture. Oh, we don't speak English. People don't like us. We don't, you can really start repeating that narrative to yourself, and all of a sudden it becomes this negative world you live in. But the biggest lesson with that transition is that you can really get through anything as long as you control your perspective on it.
I love it. And kind of one of the things that I've noticed about you is that if you were to look at you from the outside in, you wouldn't see the kind of the full depth that you have. But if you just read the Miss New York bit, because obviously you do the Miss New York bit, but then you also build Vocable AI and you start scaling that, and you know, with the AI company, and you speak on stages now and you do all that kind of stuff. Like, how does it walk me through the timeline of events from you stepping on stage as and becoming Miss New York, and then what you learned from that, and then what took you through to entrepreneurship? Yeah.
So I think the Miss New York experience, in general, the pageant experience came really out of nowhere too, because my mom was encouraging me to get more in touch with my feminine side. I grew up as a tomboy, so my mom was like, okay, now that you're done with college and you're in this period of kind of figuring out your next move, it will be really exciting for you to try pageantry, because actually I've been getting a lot of invitations in Colorado to compete at Miss Colorado USA. And so they went straight to my parents' house because I was in college at the time. And so my mom saw them and thought, oh, why not? It would be a really cool experience, no matter what. So, I thought, why not? My mom really wanted it for me, and it really did feel like something I would actually have to push myself outside my comfort zone. So I loved that idea. And after I signed up for my first pageant, I only had, I think, 3 months to prepare for it. But again, I think, and I will speak about this when it comes to pageantry, the process I had to go through to prepare to even just step on that stage was the part that I fell in love with. Because for once in my life, I felt like I finally got the discipline to really work on myself in ways I haven't done before, like really go deep and ask myself questions I never did before, learn how to take care of my body physically, emotionally, psychologically. I was very, very strict with my regimen. And for the first time, I felt like I finally had structure, because I was working towards a goal that, even though at the time I didn't really care that much about winning that pageant, but I just cared about doing my best and obviously I'm very competitive. supportive. So that process changed me at the core. And of course, my first pageant I didn't win. I placed, I think, top 10, and that really made me happy because I haven't done that before. And the fact that I was in a top 10 made me excited about trying it again next year. And this time I'm like, okay, I have 12 months to prepare for this. So if I was able to place top 10 in 3 months of preparation, imagine what I can do with 12 months of preparation. And so that process then became even more amplified, where now I really structured the next few months ahead of that goal and really put together a regimen. I had hired a pageant coach who really helped me understand myself, what I bring to the table, and how to interview with judges who you basically have 2 minutes or so to really convince judges on why you are the best candidate to represent your state or your country. And that takes a lot of practice. And so I felt like I learned a lot of soft skills along the process that ultimately became so important in my career as well.
Because you were explaining to me off the podcast that, because I thought pageantry was all just about beauty, like the best looking woman wins and that's just it. But you're all good looking, it's really hard, and they just pick whoever they can believe is the best looking girl on the day. I thought that's how it worked. But you were telling me that there's a lot in this about communication, a lot of, how you articulate yourself that comes into this that I never even understood. So can you just give me a bit of a breakdown of that?
So I think the beauty part is probably the easiest part, to be honest. And it's easy to be pretty these days. It's easy to really work on, our physical attributes. I think the hardest part that a lot of people are not talking about when it comes to pageantry is the discipline it takes to really go deep with who you are, ask yourself questions, and understand why you even want to do this, and why would you be the best candidate for your state or for your country. And I think that, that has a lot to do with how you articulate your goals, how you articulate your story as well, because a lot of the judges are looking for women with a really interesting story to tell, because ultimately when you win, you become a change agent in that community. So you become a role model to a lot of other young women, not because you're gorgeous and, not because of the glitz and the glam, but rather because of how you carry yourself, how you speak, how your presence is felt when you enter a room, how you interview, and then also all the requirements after you win are really related to philanthropy and, going to school and speaking to young women, getting involved with whatever causes you are passionate about. So even understanding, what am I passionate about? When I have this title, when I have this platform, what can I do with it to actually really bring change to my community? And so this is what we think about when we're preparing for pageants. And a lot of people think, we're just at the gym working out 24/7, getting all these, things done for our hair and lashes and makeup. That is the easy part. I didn't have to worry about too much about that. I had to really get honest with myself and pick causes I was really passionate about, understand what I'm actually able to do when I do have this title, and so on and so forth. And I think those skills were so important to learn, and obviously in that process, but also I remember transitioning from obviously grad school to then applying for jobs and moving to New York and interviewing for jobs. And I remember how easy that was for me because I had gone through a much tougher process with pageantry. Like I wasn't nervous when I was doing job interviews, and every job I've interviewed for, I've gotten. And I just felt like the reason that I was successful at that is because of everything I've learned prior to that in pageantry.
And you've built up that communication base, and you're comfortable sat with people and asking you difficult questions.
And also it's the confidence. I think for me, up until then, I was very shy, and I never thought I would ever be able to step on a stage in a bikini or even in a gown and answer questions. And I had like 30 seconds with a timer. You have to be quick on your feet, and you can't mess up. And the confidence it takes to just do that, not just win, but do that and then win, that is very irreplaceable because it's true life experience that nobody can take away from you. And that's truly where confidence comes from. You're like, if I've done that, I can do anything.
It's a lot more than the hot girl summer that I thought it was just about at the start when you were explaining it to me. Like the depth in it, I was like, wow, I didn't realize there was that much depth. I didn't realize she had to go sit down for an interview with a panel and talk about some topic that's not related to being good looking. I didn't see all that in it. So it's good to kind of experience how much pressure there is on not just looking the part but also being the part as well.
And I've done the both sides. So I've done the competing when I had to sit in front of judges, and then I've done the judging part. So I judged Miss Universe. which is the highest title you can ever get to in pageantry. And I judged Miss Universe in 2018, and that was, I think, 190 women competing, somewhere around that, from all over the world. And that was probably the toughest job I've had. I mean, choosing between 100 plus women, almost 200 women, and they're all gorgeous. They're all super successful. They all have great causes they're supporting. They've all have done amazing things for their countries. They speak multiple languages. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I was genuinely having anxiety about it, more than when I competed.
Nothing's annoyed me more, though, over the last few years, and I've seen some of the Miss US states pick a bloke in drag to win some of those states, and that's far too woke for me. Like, when a woman's not even winning a woman's competition, that is like too far.
Yeah, that's
too far
the same
that way.
argument with women's sports. I mean, that's a huge debate happening now, but I agree with that.
I think Trump's now he's defined male and female as the only two sexes in America. It's like it's a good start towards a process where we can clear out all of that stuff, because let's be real, they shouldn't be winning. But it was from this experience that you started to set up Sway Media, wasn't it, and move into that, where you're looking after like female voices and getting female voices into Heard and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, so when I moved, so the reason why I moved to New York too is because when I competed in Miss Colorado USA, I had won. I did not win, but I had first runner-up, which I was so close to winning the title, and it rocked me. I was like, oh no. So I didn't want to stay around Colorado anymore after that. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should move to New York and try in New York. But then I thought to myself, wait a minute, if I couldn't even win Colorado, how could I compete in New York? Because it's a lot harder. There's a lot more women there. Competing is just obviously a lot more established in pageantry than Colorado. But ultimately, I decided to just move to New York and then give it a try 6 months later. And that's when I won Miss New York US in 2015. And so when I had won that, then that became the platform I built my first business on. And so the idea was, all right, you have to pick kind of your platform and your cause when you're competing in pageants. For me, was really supporting women entrepreneurs in many ways. One, through storytelling and content creation that can help elevate their voices. And two, through like community, really bringing women together that are supporting each other and creating that like dynamic mentorship. And so when I won Miss New York, I decided then to launch a podcast. At the time, I remember there weren't a lot of female-forward podcasts that focused on telling women's stories in a very unconventional way, right? So women who have chosen unconventional paths to success and made it, but were still relatable and accessible to others for mentorship. And so I launched a podcast that took off and was number 2 on iTunes, top 5 best podcasts for women entrepreneurs by Inc. And so that kind of showed me that there is this demand and hunger from the women's community to really create a female-forward media brand that's also very substantive and focuses on the true stories of resilience, mentorship, strength, achievement, versus, the typical female-forward media that is focused on, dating, lifestyle, fashion, beauty. And so that ultimately then gave birth to Sway, which was a more female-forward media platform, but it focused on thought leadership and storytelling.
What advice and guidance could you give us on creating thought leadership in the world for all the listeners right now? Like, if they're looking to create this year their personal brand and create more thought leadership in their space, how would you kind of give them the 3, 4, 5 step process to do that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is understanding your why. Why do you want to be a thought leader in this space, right? Is it because of your domain expertise? Is it because you have a professional story or experience that really leads to people seeing you as a thought leader in that space? It has to be driven by some kind of, I would say, credible experience that you can really speak to, because the bulk of thought leadership is about storytelling. So it's different than, creating kind of technical blog content or speaking about the news or speaking about things that are just kind of more mainstream. With thought leadership, it's really about, oh, this person is a thought leader in their space because of this experience they've gone through, or because this expertise they're really built over the years. So really understand what shapes your story, and then use that, and then basically build up on it through content creation. And that's obviously through either podcasts. For me, my thought leadership journey started with a podcast, and then it went on with long form blog creation, content creation. I know some people don't really care for that anymore because they don't want to write, and nobody's reading long content anymore. So the next best step, I would say, is just short form content creation. So whether that's Reels or TikToks, or it could also just be Instagram posts, or small kind of short LinkedIn posts. That's usually what I typically do. Is LinkedIn is a very great thought leadership platform, as opposed to Instagram, for example. So it depends on really what drives you, what your story is, what your domain expertise, and where your audience lives. If your audience is doing a lot of more video content, then YouTube, Reels, TikToks, it's best for you. If your audience lives more in the professional world around LinkedIn, newsletters, they're more kind of in that professional environment, then you focus on those channels to build your thought leadership.
Do you focus specifically on one channel? Because I know Gary V's out there saying like post on everything, and it overwhelms a lot of people when they haven't started. I mean, I know for a fact from my own experience, like I've got a team that allows me to post on all the channels and post like 3 times a day on this channel, that channel. Without it, I couldn't do it. Like it'd just be impossible for me. I wouldn't be able to manage that and run a business. Right. So where would you say, like, would you first say like break down whether you're the writer, whether you're the speaker, whether you're the video person first, like pick the format and then pick the platform predicated off that, or how would you devise it?
Yeah, I think going back to the audience. So you want to understand where your target audience is, because I would think that the goal of thought leadership for anyone thinking about that is to eventually monetize that and attract clients or customers. And so where do your clients and customers spend the most time? And for you to figure that part out, you want to really get clear on who your ideal customer profile looks like get very clear on it, like the age, demographics, locations, as much information as possible. It's almost like you're painting a picture of a person that you think that person is my perfect customer. And based on that, then you focus on the 2 top channels that they are spending the most time on. So if you're targeting Gen Z, then you definitely want to go the TikTok way, the Instagram way, YouTube as well. If you're targeting a much older demographic, but also more kind of corporate executives, B2B enterprise, leadership teams, then LinkedIn and Substack as a newsletter would be kind of the best channels for you to focus on. So it really depends on who you're targeting, and that dictates what channels you want to focus on. Also, what it dictates what channels you want to focus on is what kind of content are you best at. For example, I don't really like to be on video. That's not my thing, but I do love to write. That's kind of my actual passion. I feel like I express myself better when I take time to write my thoughts, structure them. That's why blogs for me, LinkedIn posts and newsletters did really well when I was building my brand. So you don't want to push yourself too much outside your comfort zone when you're getting started, because you want to make sure that you're consistent. And in order to stay consistent, you want to focus on what's actually going to drive results for you and what you feel most comfortable with. And that depends on your audience and the type of content you want to create.
Yeah, I think people get too drawn into the shiny object syndrome. Like they see someone else creating this content over here, it works for them. So they're like, okay, I'll do that as well. And I'll do this as well. I'll do this. It's like I can clearly see by looking at like the platforms, which platforms are my key platforms and which we should double down on and which we should be like, okay, cool, we'll post on it, but it's not our key concern. And I believe, I don't know whether you agree with this, but like you should there's probably about 2 or 3 platforms you should concentrate on as a business or brand. The others you should just post on, but not really give the time until they start, until you get a feedback loop from the content that you are posting on there saying, hey, this is generating. So if LinkedIn started to generate me business right now, then obviously, okay, cool, I'll put more time into it because it's generating me business. But if it wasn't doing that, you wouldn't want to double down on it. So I think that's where people can get real clear on it. But what made you decide to go, right, not only do I want to build in the AI space, but I'm going to become the thought leader in the AI space that you have? Because obviously now you're stepping on stages, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're everywhere. Like what's been the process of that?
I mean, again, I think I never really set out to say I want to be a thought leader in X or Y space. When I'm passionate about something and I'm deep in that space, I tend to post about it on my social channels here and there. Again, I'm sure I can also always do more of the content, but I started posting about AI early on as far as, where we're headed, what's exciting about it, how people can use it. So really breaking down the practical aspects of AI and breaking down the use cases that people can start thinking about and getting creative with it. And that started resonating with, people who are not technical, people who were small business owners, solopreneurs, content creators. And I started kind of bringing a following around that space. And then I was getting noticed by events coordinators or other thought leaders in the space that actually create events around this, or, put together webinars and conversations around that topic. So again, I think it's just the act of being authentic about what you like to talk about and what you're passionate about, and pushing content out there that shows your expertise and your credentials, and then you start attracting the right opportunities. So you don't necessarily set out and tell people, okay, I want to be a thought leader. There's, of course, an art to pitching yourself to these events and other speaking engagements, and there are agencies for that, and there are people that are really good at that. For me, it was never the goal, right? So my goal was never to become a public speaker or to become an AI thought leader. For me, my whole goal was I want to build this amazing software that helps small businesses automate their content creation process. And along the way, I was sharing my learnings from everything that I, was discovering through trial and error, through experimentations with new AI models. And people just gravitated towards that because it was interesting to them. And also I did it in a way that was practical and easily understood. So I was able to attract an audience that really was seeking that knowledge. And I was also able to get the attention of people who were looking for speakers and creators around, the field of AI, but then from a practical standpoint, not a technical standpoint. So I think it was more of an authentic initiative that I took, and then everything else kind of fell into place.
And I think you've done it by the way of documenting, not creating. So you've not created specific content, so to speak. You've documented what you're doing, and then that's built a brand around you doing AI, and then this, that, and the other. And as you're building this company, as you build your brand, you're introducing more and more people into the funnel of knowing who you are and what you're about, which is a great way to do it.
And LinkedIn was, and just for people that are wondering what channels feel, at least for me, were the best is LinkedIn. And I feel like a lot of people sleep on LinkedIn. But for me, it made sense because one, my whole goal is to attract talent for my company. So that's where LinkedIn comes in. I also needed to attract investors for my company. That's where investors spend a lot of time as well. I also wanted to learn from other fellow tech founders who are building in a space, and so they are a lot more active on LinkedIn than Instagram or TikTok. And then I was also looking to attract just my target customers, which are content teams and small business owners and entrepreneurs. So to me, LinkedIn made a lot of sense. And LinkedIn now has come a long way because they also offer video, they offer newsletters, they offer articles, and then they offer posts. So you have all 4 content types in one platform. And that's where my ideal customer lives. So why would I want to? I don't even have TikTok. I post on Instagram, but it's more, I think, it's less professional and more lifestyle and just kind of documenting my journey. But I don't go deep in the content space. I don't go deep in AI as much as I do on LinkedIn. So for me, I felt like if I were to invest any time or effort or even money towards content creation and a platform, LinkedIn made the most sense.
I mean, definitely organically, I think their ads platform on LinkedIn is crap.
Right, but no, I don't do ads or anything, but it's organic.
Yeah, definitely organic. I'm trying to figure this whole LinkedIn thing out. I'm posting short form content on there. It's not doing as well as I want. I thought, LinkedIn's meant to be the go of a platform. Why are we not getting the reach that everyone's been promising me? Like, this is a gold mine. I'm still figuring it out. So I have to talk to you about that off camera, because I think it is an opportunity for sure. I just think it's for the right type of content. You have to generate. I think because you're natively a writer, ever since those days when you were journaling, you were always practicing the art of writing. And I think LinkedIn as a writing platform is powerful.
That's why I love it. Yeah. And I like that because I also love, because the first thing I do now when I wake up is actually browse LinkedIn, because the amount of value I'm getting out of it is insane. And that's because people actually take the time to explain things, and I'm able to read it versus, watch the quick 30-second video that kind of, I'm not really grasping that knowledge. But I think LinkedIn it's harder to break through for sure, but that's because it's very value driven. So the content has to be super educational. You have to know what you're talking about. It has to be practical. And with other social channels like Instagram and TikTok, I feel like the bulk of that content that does well is surface level, shallow content that just makes people entertained. There are some educational content there for sure, but at least from my experience, it's not what does well. Like if I were to post something about, and I did some experiments, when I post something about just more lifestyle and fun, very like surface level content, it does really well. But then when I post something about me talking on AI or content or anything of that sort, it's like,
you see,
no one cares.
I've had a little bit of a different experience
Yeah.
with LinkedIn, because I go on there and often I laugh to myself because here I'm going to coin a term right now, right? I'm going to coin the term LinkedIn.
It is very cheesy.
LinkedIn wankers, right? And this is where a guy goes on LinkedIn and he'll write a whole story post about how he gave to a woman in the street, or how he gave an opportunity of a job to this. It's all just like, it's proper wanky when you actually read the posts on there. Some of the stuff, I would actually like to set up a parody account on there and parody some of these professional posts, because I'm sure that these guys writing these posts, this stuff never happened. It's just constant.
It's like what there was a meme going around. It's like, oh, I went to a funeral this weekend. Here's 5 things I learned about sales from my experience, or something like that. It was just something absurd where they take a random story that happened to them and they turn it into like 5 things they learned for sales or marketing or whatnot.
It was just this. I read this story on there the other day about how some guy had met this guy in the street, and then next thing you know, he's given him a job and he's changed his life and this and that. And when you're reading it, you're like, this is just direct response copy at its best. Like it's like a written version of a video sales letter as you're running through it. It's just, to me, it's like that's the one thing that annoys me about LinkedIn. But the second thing that annoys me about LinkedIn is the connection requests, the soulless connection requests. The I would love to be added to your professional, like that stuff doesn't.
And now it's automated, so it's way worse.
But once you get over those 2 things, the platform is super powerful, like you said. But I would have someone manage it rather than do it all yourself. Like,
I mean, it's the same thing too with a lot of crappy algorithms on TikToks and Instagram. There's a lot of things that I'm like, how did I end up on this side of Instagram? It's sometimes I'm like, how are people so comfortable putting this kind of content out there? Again, so there's shitty stuff on there too, and same with LinkedIn. It has a level of professional cheesiness that I definitely can't stand. But for me, I also make sure that the network I build there is very intentional. So I follow the right people. Again, I don't accept any requests unless I've met them or that I know them. There's a follow button, so people can follow me, but I'm not accepting them as my requests, connections. So there's an art to it, but I think in terms of value, when you get past the cheesiness and the weird storytelling approach, there are, at least with AI, I've seen, there are people who are really good at sharing the things you need to know about AI in a very quick tidbits. And there are a lot of research papers now out there. And for me, being in the field, I kind of have to know about them. But some people are just, when I go on LinkedIn, they're just summarizing a lot of it in like 2-3 bullet points. I'm like, great, I got what I needed out of it. And I mean, I could do it with ChatGPT, but it's good to see other people's opinions on it, which I can't get from research papers. So it has definitely played a good part. And the other one with in relation to where AI value is Twitter, or X, I guess it's called. Because the beauty about these 2 platforms is people are actually sharing open source code. They're sharing resources and tools that they're using for building different kinds of tools, different kind of use cases. And for me, that's what I'm looking for. As someone who's building in a space, I'm looking for people who are sharing resources in that regard. So Instagram and TikTok don't really have that kind of audience or even community there.
Have you heard about the honeypot profiles on LinkedIn? Have you heard about this whole deep topic?
No, what's that?
So basically,
enlighten me.
So I know people in the industry doing this. So basically, men that own certain companies that are trying to sell certain things. Let's just say I'm a man or a woman that has a software as a service that I want to sell to someone, and it's enterprise level. So contracts are like $1 million, these kind of plus level contracts, right? Or 50 grand a month, these kind of things. So what people will do is they'll rent a good looking female professional's profile, and they'll use her profile to send DMs to these tech executives, like, you know, anyone from like 35 to mid 50s. This is an attractive female, introducing you to this software is going to revolutionize your business. Back and forth, and it's like these guys believe that they're talking to these girls, so it's like the LinkedIn version of OnlyFans, and then they end up buying these massive corporate tech deals and software deals and integrating them into their company, but they're not even talking to this woman. Someone's rented this profile on LinkedIn to use it to get their softwares into, and this is happening at a massive scale.
But is it true? Because I consider myself an attractive female. And then I send a lot of, especially when I was trying to just get people to test my software early on, and I sent it to heads of content teams at companies, and I don't think that it made a difference.
I know people that have printed cash out
really?
of this. Yeah.
Damn, I'm losing out.
I'll show you the whole thesis behind this, but I'm telling you now, it absolutely exists, and not many people know it exists. But there's
I'm sure there's also
profiles.
a way of how they communicate and those messages and stuff, because they don't really care about brand reputation.
It's not brand reputation, but there's many people, and even men. Like there's even a guy came to me and said, "Hey, can I rent your profile to speak to people?" Because obviously, with me building a brand with this podcast, it's like they're trying to get me to rent my profile out to speak to people, because like I was speaking to Frankie, you know what I'm saying? So even though it's used in a slightly different way, there's people doing that all the time. So it's a whole thing on LinkedIn that people, a whole level to it that people don't understand that's there. I know you don't understand it, but it's definitely there. It's under the surface. Going on to the AI, how did you, before you even built the company, before you even built the service and got everything under the banner, how did you kind of draw it out in terms of on a piece of paper, how you wanted to build it and who it was for and how you structured it and who were your key hires and what revenue you need to do and all that plan of attack? How did you overcome that?
Guys, before we go into this podcast is sponsored by contentremoval.com. If you're looking to remove any images, videos, search results, fake accounts, or anything else online, go to contentremoval.com. We've looked after everybody from the likes of Alex Hormozy, Kayla Racines, Tammy Hembrow, to a whole host of other brands and celebrities that you know and love. And we'd love to help you with your issues online. So if you have any issues online and you want to get in touch with us, click the link below this video and go to contentremoval.com.
Yeah, so I think the very first step for me was, again, understanding my own pain point, because I did create this out of my own experience. And so I've been in a content marketing space across the board, working with bigger teams, smaller teams, by myself. So I experienced a lot of the pain points that most solopreneurs experience when it comes to content creation and the lack of resources there is around that when you're scaling it. And I was able to really learn for the past 10 plus years processes that I put together to really scale that process. And so the first step for me was to map that out. So understanding, okay, what is the ultimate process that will help someone without resources, without a big team, without money to invest in an agency or hiring someone, scale their content using AI. So I first mapped out my process, saying, okay, the first step is I audit my audience, I audit my content. Second step is I create a content calendar. So I plan my ideas, I figure out my cadence for each channel, I prioritize which channel. So there's a step to that already that I think most humans in the content creation space already know. So we have a framework in place, we have a structure. And now the last step for me was, okay, now that I have put together the structure and workflow, where can AI come in for people to help them not just create the final draft of a caption or a blog, but also automate a lot of the repetitive tasks that go into that framework for the content creation lifecycle. And I mapped that out in just like a whiteboard, right? So it's just really kind of thinking out loud with myself. Then my next step was I talked to at least 10 other people in the content creation space about their own process and pain points to see, if they kind of feel what I'm, what I'm struggling with.
So you're doing the market research.
Yeah. So yeah, I've done that over a few years, because I started this process in 2019. Again, in my first company, that was already a pain point. We wanted to scale content operations, but we didn't have funding or a lot of revenue. So we didn't want to hire more people on the team full time. We wanted to scale using technology. And so I started thinking about this process back then. I think after I do my market research, then I'm able to talk to someone who's more on the tech side. And that to me easily was my brother. So thankfully I had that resource ready because he's also worked with me in my first startup. So he's also experienced a lot of the content creation pain points. And so when I talked to him about, okay, here's the process and here's the outcome I want my users or my customers to experience, how do we now bring this into a user flow and a product that we can build with an experience that also is intuitive for non-techie people? Because I knew that my audience and my customer is not going to be someone who's tech savvy, is not going to be someone who's even used a lot of the softwares out there to manage their content. They're kind of just creating on a whim, they're creating on demand, and now they're just using ChatGPT to create last minute, and they need a process in place, and so they never had that. And so after I brainstormed that with my brother, then we were able to have a prototype that we built, which was the first thing to just test out the functionalities, which is creating the content, optimizing it, and then coming up with the ideas for the content calendar. Once we had that prototype, we started demoing that to investors. We demoed it to a bigger cohort of potential customers to get feedback. And then at that point, using that feedback from investors and customers, we were able to build the MVP.
So you raised VC on this?
I raised pre-seed from angels.
Yeah. Yeah. So how, when you walk me through the process of raising like pre-seed?
So pre-seed is not typically as hard because for me at least, I didn't go for institutional money when it comes to pre-seed. My whole goal with pre-seed was to also raise from people who are strategic. These are angels or family offices led by, public figures or people who have really done this before at scale, and they're able to also help us from a marketing standpoint, from operation standpoint, and bring talents to the team once we're ready to scale.
So you're basically looking for not only the money, but you're looking for like whose name can we have on the website or behind the brand to also unlock other doors to a higher user base as well. So it's not just the money that they're bringing the reputation with it as well.
Correct. The reputation, the network, the skills too. So we were looking at people who have scaled companies to at least 100 million plus in revenue. And we were also looking for people who have access to talent, who have that credibility that would, let's say we met with someone who we want to bring on as an executive, and then they know that our investor is so and so, then they're able to be like, okay, this is a credible person, that our investors are also able to help us vet and interview these people. So they've done this before in a way that they can also guide me. So if something is not going well, or if I'm stuck somewhere, that I could just pick up the phone and call them and say, okay, here's where I'm struggling. Can I send you this for feedback? What do you think? And that you can't do as much with VCs early on, because one, especially if you do raise pre-seed from VCs, you're not their biggest company. And a lot of them haven't built companies. Let's put it that way, right? So a lot of VCs at least the partners, maybe some of them have, but most partners at the pre-seed VC level haven't really built companies or are able to really help us on the operational level. And so for me, that was very important because yes, I needed the money, but I also needed a lot of guidance to really do this the right way. And especially launching something in AI and a tech product, we really wanted a lot of help early on with the right tech team, the right process in place. And so one of our investors actually was very, very helpful with that. He actually brought his own software company and delegated them to help us build our MVP, which was easy for us to do then and launch a lot quicker.
It's interesting because having traveled around the world and spoke to like entrepreneurs in Australia, the UK and Dubai and the US entrepreneurs, no matter what they're starting, they all raise, like on seed, VC, whatever, they all talk about raising from the jump. Entrepreneurs in like the UK or Australia will bootstrap things.
Right.
And I until I started talking to US entrepreneurs, and they're talking about, oh yeah, well the idea is good, so we're just going to raise money, and I'm like, raise money from who? Like, oh, just people over here, the investors here. I never even thought of like we're not really pushed to think like that. We're like, okay, we might get some family money or whatever, put it in the business and something other. Some of us might raise. There are people that do it in these markets, but I'm saying it's not as prevalent as the US. Why is it so ingrained within the US entrepreneurial space to raise money on the idea from the jump?
Because we've normalized it in the startup world, and you have a lot of these media outlets like TechCrunch and Forbes and Entrepreneur and Fortune. The majority of the headlines is this person raised this much money, this person raised this much money. So then it almost made it seem, and I'm not saying that's the reality, it made it seem as that it was the easiest thing to do in the world, and so why not? And so a lot of, and again, I'm saying a lot of tech companies need to raise money if you're building deep tech, if you're building in the space, cybersecurity or medical or healthcare. There are some companies and some ideas that take a longer time to market and to revenue. So you definitely need capital to build the product for a few years before you're able to go out there and launch and monetize and commercialize your product. And then there are startups that are just great products. They're not deep tech. Those companies, and I consider mine right now there, those companies can probably get away with bootstrapping at the beginning. And you probably should. It might be better for you to do so because you have more leverage when you then get to a place where you're going to only raise money to scale because you've already proved the concept. You've already gone to market. You've already talked to your customers. They already know about you. You've gotten that feedback. You're closer to that product market fit, but now you need that capital to build it properly, to hire the right talent, and then to scale. So it's an easier pitch when you have the traction than if you have an idea in the back of the napkin and say, okay, here's my great idea. Yes, it could be a great idea, but it doesn't mean that it's going to scale to a unicorn status. And the problem with raising money from VCs is that it puts you under that pressure for hyper growth over sustainability. And so sometimes it creates that conflict and misalignment with personal and professional values. And I found that I struggle with that sometimes too, because I would be great with just building a profitable, sustainable company that grows in a healthy, steady pace. But once you raise VC money, that's no longer an option. You gotta have that hyper growth. And so you're pushed to fail fast, grow fast. Sometimes decision making is very impulsive. You're also not always focused on revenue. You're just focused on growth, like user growth, brand awareness, and that doesn't always translate to revenue and profitability. And for me, that is a big misalignment with the kind of values I have as far as building businesses, because I want to make sure that whatever I'm building is actually profitable and creates value, but also sustainable. And with VC money, sometimes you're really pushed to chase that higher and higher, inflated valuation, raise more again until, you hit that $1 billion valuation. So it's the unicorn status chase that not every founder wants to live that life. And it brings so much more stress than you can handle. And I've tried, in my first company, because it was media, I've tried raising VC money. Obviously, media companies should not raise VC money, at least media startup, that is. And I learned the struggles of fundraising early on. And now I'm approaching it in a very, very strategic way where I always feel like I'm in control, that I have leverage, and that I'm very strategic, and I have a very good reason as to why I need VC money.
So your main reason for needing the seed money was just to get the right names on the boat and the right guidance, so you could pick up the phone and say, hey, Dave, you've grown this company from 0 to 100 million in this space, and you just want to be able to phone that guy and also have access to his network to unlock the value there. That's specifically why you sold part of the business, not because you didn't really need the money to build it.
No, I mean, I didn't, but I needed more money to build it faster. And with AI now, things are moving really, really fast. So another reason, again, I thought about not needing to raise, because I'm going to start raising our seed round this year, like in a couple months. And the reason why is because we need to compete with the landscape, and the landscape is very, very fast-paced right now. So if we do it the sustainable way right now, the way that we just wait for revenue and reinvest it, it's a slower growth, and it's also slower progress when it comes to product launches and features. Now, if you have 5 million in the bank, ready to go, or ready to deploy, you can hire 5 times more resources, and you can launch a new feature every week, if not every other day. And then you can learn faster and grow faster. And so for us, being in the AI space, I don't want to make the mistake of being the last to launch, for example, AI agents, right? Which is now the bigger talk in the content creation landscape this year. And so I want more resources. So instead of having 2 engineers in a team, I need 10. And so for that, you need VC money, but also institutional money helps you attract better talent. And so for us now, the biggest thing is talent when it comes to AI.
This is why I love the US so much, and why I see it as the biggest growth trajectory over the next 8 years in terms of where every entrepreneur should be, because you guys are just, it's fast paced. You've got the right attitude for it. You're willing to like raise money and have conversations that just, even if you don't know the answer to the question, you'll still try and raise money to answer the question that you're trying to answer.
Yeah.
And it's that whole energy, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen it in the US, you can't unsee it. So especially that was my experience of going to Miami and LA and seeing how you guys move. I was like, wow. I've been in the Australian market, the UK market is completely different. And Europe is so slow compared to the fast pace. I mean, people think Dubai is fast paced. I don't think it's fast paced at all. I think it's slow here compared to the way that you guys move. Have you noticed that? Because obviously you were considering moving from Miami to Dubai and you've been tossing up that whole thing. Just walk me through so everyone can hear this, like the clear differences between the American dream and, you know, the rest of the world and like the Dubais and stuff like that everyone's talking about.
Well, I haven't lived in Dubai, but I have been here quite some time, so I don't know the full experience. But I will say that ever since, obviously, I started businesses in the U.S. and grew up in the U.S., I lived in Germany too, and I have investors in Europe, so I've done a lot of business in Europe as well. But again, I think there is just this, not to sound cheesy, but there is this mindset of like anything is possible. And we can figure anything out. We don't have to have it all figured out. As long as you know the next step, as long as you have a great idea and you're just wake up and you're determined to make it happen no matter what, the doors are opening. And there's so many doors, even if one closes, you know another one's gonna open. It's just that we fostered that mentality that it makes it so easy to operate without even thinking about it. I think when I come to Europe, I feel like there is just a lot of, like I'm jumping through a million hoops just to get one thing done, or to have one person deliver something as like a deliverable, or send me a contract, or get back to me on this idea. You know, there is not as much of a sense of urgency, maybe. I think with other parts of the world, they value quality of life and a slower pace because that adds to the quality of life. And I agree with that. That's something I miss definitely in the US. And they don't have this like perfectionism and drive for excellence the way we have in America. And that's why I will always pick there as home. And any business I start, I would only have it based in the US. And I would prefer, for the most part, to work with US-based companies, US-based customers. And then there's the other side of it, consumerism. So anything you launch in the US, there's a market for it. And here, that's the issue. Like, even in my country, I'm like, I would never be able to. I mean, they called me to speak, and this is the biggest marketing conference in Africa. And I thought, oh, this will be a great place to market my software. But the pace of adoption for this kind of stuff in other parts of the world is a lot slower, especially now even with AI. I mean, it's still slow on the masses in the US, so I can only imagine anywhere else in the world. I know Europe is a little bit ahead, of course, but this sense of consumerism where, oh, a new product launches, even though I might not need it, but I kind of want it, I'll pay for it. Like that, again, culture of consumerism, capitalism, just all combined really makes it such a fertile ground for entrepreneurship, which I don't think I see much in other parts of the world.
I was missold this whole thesis on the West is dead thing. I was missold it, and obviously moving to the Dubai at the time was like the best place that I had been so far until I went to the US. I was like, okay, now this is the real game, and I want to encourage any British entrepreneur, any Australian entrepreneur that listens to this. I want to encourage all of you to think about how you can move to the US and apply what you're doing in the US, because I think it's the biggest opportunity right now. I've recently just set up another company in the US, and I'm going to be shifting operations over there because even just talking to you off the podcast and seeing what I've seen there, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen the US and how it moves and how fast paced it is, I don't think you can see it. And when people try and tell me that Dubai is the same. I'm like, you the GDP of Dubai is one in one city. You wouldn't even be able to do, like, one small city in America is bigger than here. Like, it's just not even comparable. And when people try and compare it, I just think they're just talking absolute crap.
Yeah,
Like,
and I don't know. I think also, and I don't know Dubai well either, but I know here it's also a lot about optics and status and every kind of maybe interaction, at least from my experience. And again, I haven't lived here to live the normal local life, but at least when I come here on business, a lot of the people I interact with just seems very transactional and about, optics and status and, basically things that I don't necessarily like to get involved with too much in the US. I think with the US also, even when it comes to networking events and conferences, a lot of it also is very value driven. And a lot of it is also about collaboration and partnerships and like, what can we do together versus, what have you achieved and what can you do for me? And I appreciate that about, at least when I was in New York, the bulk of the interactions felt that way, which I really felt helped foster again that sense of entrepreneurship, because you think, okay, I have mentors, I have partners, I have collaborators that maybe I can't figure this out by myself, but I know that I can find the right people to help me do that. I don't know if there is that sense of community here as much as I've experienced in the US.
I'll make it perfectly clear for everyone to understand that this is this conversation, because I've lived this experience. It's simply this, right? We are sold this tax-free lifestyle. People driving around the block here in a Lamborghini with a nice watch on in the same circle 16,000 times, right? We're sold that as the lifestyle, the tax-free thing, the whole that's the ethos behind coming here, which is fine. I get it. At a certain level of life, cool. Come here, park yourself here, do the tax-free thing. That's cool. But if you're talking about, could you build your company bigger in the US with access to the US market and paying, less deductions, a small percentage of tax, depending on what state you're in, or being tax-free in Dubai, just having access to that market and the size of the market, you could, a business here that will make 2.5 to 5 million could do 50, 60, 70, 100 million in the US. Like, there is a massive difference. It's not even comparable. And this whole tax-free thing locks entrepreneurs into thinking small, because I've never met an entrepreneur in my whole life that's billionaire status or a few hundred million status. When I tell them about tax-free life, they laugh at me. And the reason they laugh at me is because it's a stupid concept. Because you just go to the biggest market, provide the most value, and you just pay a little bit of tax. Who cares? Like, we've all been missold the dream. That's my opinion on it from what I've seen. And I've lived that life. I've tried to be the entrepreneur that lives a tax-free life and does all that stuff. I just think it's a complete farce. I don't subscribe to it anymore.
Yeah.
My mates have moved back to London, and they're doing more revenue in London than they were doing over here. And I've got mates that have gone to the US, and what happened? They do more revenue. Why? Because the markets are just bigger. Why would you put yourself in a small market just to save tax? It's just stupid.
Yeah, no.
It's a stupid transaction.
Especially when you compare that to the vast amount of opportunities that the US has to offer. So it doesn't make any sense to just pick Dubai just because of the taxes. I mean, especially, it depends again on how big your business is or how big you're trying to go. But having maybe at least a footprint in the US makes complete sense. Maybe you have, your home base here. But again, I haven't lived the Dubai lifestyle much, but just going back to what you said, a lot of it feels very misled.
Yeah, I think so, because at the end of the day, right, let's be real. If I ask people why they're here, obviously they say the lifestyle, and then they say taxes, and then they say safety, or they say one of those three in whatever order, which is all, and they're all good points. But let's be real. 6 months a year you can live here and it's enjoyable. The other 6 months, it's obnoxious. It's so obnoxiously hot. You wouldn't want to be here anyway. So it's not even a place you can live all the time. And then to that response, they'll say, well, it's a good hub and I can travel out. Yeah, but having to travel out is that, why don't you just go and put yourself in a location, pay a little bit of whatever you pay Caesar, and then go do more business, more revenue on the back of it. Yeah. And it's just like, all this has dawned on me because I've lived this life and I've lived every area of the life. I've paid the high tax in Australia, I've paid the high tax in the UK, then I've lived tax free. It's like, And then I've seen the US. It's like, once you've seen all those things, it's like, which one's the best? Absolutely. Every day of the week, the US all day long.
Yeah.
LLC, US, go into the market. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, why not go after it in the biggest market?
Exactly.
Right.
I actually told my parents recently, I said, I'm thinking about moving to Dubai. And for me, I didn't even bring up the taxes because I don't think it matters for me. But I was like, because I don't think the US is a good place to raise a family. And I want to focus more on starting a family, and maybe Dubai might be a better place. And then they just looked at me like, so we just sacrificed everything to move our family to the US to raise you there, because we thought that was the best place to raise a family, only for you to come back on this side of the world because you don't think that where you were raised is a great place to be raising a family. But look at how you turned out. And I was like, wait, that actually doesn't make any sense now that I think of it. Yeah.
We had a conversation before that hasn't gone public. But the reason why we came back to film this conversation is because what I thought happened after the podcast was quite profound to me. We would go down the coffee shop, we have this conversation about like lives and how we're living this and the other. And I think I was listening to obviously how you spoke on the podcast previously, and then how you were speaking in the coffee shop. And I pointed out to you that there was a few incongruencies, I think it's fair to say, with how you were talking about how you wanted to live your life and how you were living your life. Can you just break down, like, from your thoughts from being on the other side of the table of that conversation, how kind of like the whole thesis behind that and what you thought came out of that for you?
Yeah, it definitely was an interesting, unusual conversation, because I've always been the type of woman to speak on entrepreneurship and ambitions and just doing more and achieving more. Again, that goes back to that chip on my shoulder and that driving force that stems from being an immigrant at such an early age. And so to me, that was always the essence of every conversation I would have. And also that was my purpose in life, right? So I wanted to achieve more and create more value, build more businesses. And I was telling you too, outside even the podcast, I was trying to launch 2 more ideas and 2 more businesses that I was working on. So I always have all these great ideas, and I'm always in this energy of creating and building. But then there's this other kind of side of me that I don't think I talk much about, and especially not publicly, is just this craving of wanting to settle down and just want stability, being home with my family, creating life, being a mother. Just the things that I haven't really experienced yet, but I know as a woman, it's a yearning that I've always had within me, even before this whole entrepreneurship and ambitious side of me comes out. And I felt like, obviously I'm getting older and older, but I felt like I never really sat down with myself and was clear on that, and was honest too with how I'm actually contributing to the fact that I don't have it yet, right? So, and in our conversation, what I really took out of is that I'm always in my kind of hustling, masculine energy, but then deep down, my feminine energy is really where I want to be. But the things I'm saying yes to and the things that I'm prioritizing right now in life don't necessarily go hand in hand or align with my biggest priority, which is now settling down and, having a home and a family. And so that's what I thought was interesting, because I think for the first time, you kind of just sat me down and said, all right, but you want it. This is what you want, right? But then are you doing the things that contribute or that attract that life? Are you making space to create that life? And then it hit me. I'm like, wait, maybe not.
Well, it was interesting to me, and the reason I sat you down and had that conversation with you, and it's quite hard for a man to sit down and have a conversation like that, because it's like, well, how's she going to take this? But essentially what I'd heard from you during the podcast was this real entrepreneurial spirit and this and the other, hustle. I'm going to set up more businesses. I'm going to grow this. I'm going to exit this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up 3 more businesses, Frankie. But then outside of the podcast, I was hearing about, you want to be a mother, you want to start a family, you want to, you want a home base, you don't want to be traveling around as much anymore. And then we go back and we're like, but I'm going to take on this speaking gig and I'm going to go to Malaysia, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to speak over here, I'm going to be in Saudi Arabia. And I'm like, yeah, man, like, don't you understand? Like, what you're saying is what you're saying and what you're doing isn't congruent. But in order for a woman to allow herself the opportunity to meet the right guy, to be the mother and all this stuff, she has to create space. So wouldn't it then be prudent then to go, well, hang on, I'll just stick with the one company that I've got highly optimized. I'll live the life that I love in Miami, where I go play tennis and at 10 a.m. and do all the stuff because you've got the time, because you've systemized it, rather than setting up like 2, 3, 4 more businesses. Because that was that I felt for you was active procrastination that kept you away from your ultimate truth. And I think the reason why I wanted to come back and talk about this openly on this podcast is because, one, I saw a profound change in you, and you came back lighter to the conversation afterwards. And two, I think a lot of women are being misguided into this hustle, be an entrepreneur, this, that, and the other. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't pursue that, but if they also want to be a mother as well, they have to be able to create the space at some point to be able to do that as well. And they both can't align. Can you?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, especially also being so deep in the women empowerment, space that over the past few years, and I'm obviously always a proponent for women to have all the opportunities and to pursue whatever they want to pursue, and I'm a very good example of that. And again, being in the US, that I was very privileged to have those opportunities open up. And there's always more you can do, right? There's always more money you can make. There's always more people to meet. There's always more events to speak at. But then, then on the other side, we're sacrificing some, for most of us, I'm not saying every woman wants that, but at least most women want to settle down. They want to find, a man to like help them live the life that they really meant to live, and that's creating life and building a home and building a family. And there is a very, obviously I haven't experienced it yet, but I could just feel it. There is a different level of fulfillment when you have that. And because when I first landed here in Dubai, obviously I felt like, oh wow, I finally got to that place in my career, like an amazing community that I was a part of, and having the opportunity to stay at these amazing hotels and experience all these amazing cities. And I've traveled so much. But then I was just looking out at the balcony and looking at this amazing view here in Dubai. And I'm like, but something is missing, like it's great. I made it to where I want to make it, but now I still feel like what I'm truly meant to do, I haven't done yet. And then I had to sit with you and in myself afterwards and say, I play a part in it. I have to also take accountability and look at myself in the mirror and say, yeah, you have done the hustle thing, and that's great. I'm proud of you, Iman. But let's be honest. Is this what we want right now? Or do we want to also start creating space and attracting the life that you've always wanted since you were a little girl? And I've always known I wanted to be a mom and wanted to settle down. I know some women don't really care for it, and that's also fine. But for me, I didn't want to just start thinking, oh, I'll just wait for it to come. And then in the meantime, I'm going to keep building my businesses. In the meantime, I'm going to keep making more money, which is what I'm doing. But I also feel like I haven't really created that space to attract that other side of me that I've been craving as well. And so going back to your statement around, yes, that is a tricky part of the whole feminism movement, right? So we want women to have access to as many opportunities, equal pay, of course, and you go build anything you want. You go create any business you want. You climb up the ladder, but then you also have to be cognizant of what cost does that come with. And not only that too, but I also feel like the more I thrive in that role of being this hyper independent, successful woman, building, especially publicly, and building this brand, the harder it is for me to feel like I'm able to connect with men in general in like the whole dating process. And so I think that also comes at a price that we don't really sit with ourselves and evaluate. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but it's just something to be cognizant of.
Because entrepreneurship can not all the time, but can make women more masculine, because of the stuff you have to go through to get to the level you get to, and it can harden you up a little bit. And that doesn't lean well into what you're trying to lean into when you're trying to achieve certain goals.
Guys, over the last 5 years, you've watched me travel around the world building this podcast in 9 countries with over 200 entrepreneurs. And one of the key things that I've learned is that every single one of these successful people have a playbook. They have a play-by-play of how they're going to operate their life, their mindset and everything else so they can scale. So they can scale their money, their business, their life, and everything. I want to break that down for you. So what I've done is I've set up a weekly email that's going to be going live week in, week out, giving you a play-by-play of some of the most top entrepreneurs in the world, so you can understand how they're executing on their plan, so you can execute on it too. If this is something that interests you, click the link, sign up to the email below, and that'll be coming out weekly.
But I would also add, and this is just a revelation I've had too recently, is it chips away at the nurturing side of us. Because I remember I was growing up, even just up until before I moved to New York, I was a very, very soft woman. I was very soft. And then as I started growing in my career, I could feel myself building these walls around me. The higher I go up, the more walls I build up, because I have to learn how to protect myself, how to thrive in a very competitive world. I have to have thick skin. I have to be super, strong and authoritative. So I have to develop these characters because that's what makes me successful in what I do. But at the same time, the more I do that, the more it takes away from building those soft, feminine skills, which I feel like sometimes I lost touch with. And it comes up in just how I connect, even with family or friends. Sometimes I feel detached because I'm so good at being now detached because it works for me in my work environment, but it doesn't work for me in my home environment.
So for me, sat there across the other side of the table, I had to make a decision. And the decision was like, what I'm about to say to this woman, she's either going to hate me or it's going to change her life, because there's no two ways this is going, because this is quite a confronting conversation to have, you know. And what I saw from a physiological point of view was when I told you and presented this to you, your shoulders dropped, because you were carrying so much weight physically, like physiologically in your shoulders, and this trapped energy of having to go, get more. And then you were like, that makes total sense. Like that's kind of what I felt from looking at your physiology when I was telling you this stuff.
Yeah, because and deep down I've always known that, but I never wanted to come face to face with that truth, because I felt like the moment I step into that, all right, you know what, this is great, entrepreneurship is great and all that, but I kind of want to have children and just start speaking about that, I felt like I would lose that identity that I built for so long. But that's not true. I think there's a way to be able to bring those two worlds together. And then also for me, I finally just made peace with the fact that you're going to have to live your life in phases. You can't have it all the time, all at the same time. And yes, I will always be building. I will always be entrepreneurial. I will always be, career driven. There's nothing wrong with that. But now I can also say, okay, I've done a lot of that the past almost 15 years. Now I'm ready to focus more on my personal life and my dream of being a mom, and then prioritize that. And so anything that doesn't align with that then goes into the no bucket, right? And then that doesn't mean I'm losing my business, doesn't mean I'm losing all the things I'm doing, but I will do it now, keeping in mind that it doesn't interfere with also my number one goal going into the next few years, and that's to start a family. And
then I showed you a part of how I structure my days, and how I write down my ideal day of my life, and so I always know how my ideal best version day looks, and I always read it to myself so it reminds me if I'm ever off track. And I was talking to you at the time about going to Australia, and then I realized on the top of my ideal day it says I live in Miami. So it's like even that brought me back into congruence in my own self, and that's why you need these templates in your life. I mean, when you started to write down what your ideal day looks like and how your ideal life looks like, because I know that you've done that off camera, if you don't mind me saying, but when you started to write that down, what did you let go of from that point onwards that you were going to do but now you're not going to do, predicated on that conversation?
Well, the biggest thing is having a packed schedule all the time. And I felt like, because I had time, right? So what, my approach was, I don't have much else to focus on anyway, so might as well take on this event, might as well take on this travel trip, might as well say yes to this plan here, or this event, or this new company that we want to launch, or this project partnership. So I felt like I had all the time because I don't have this personal life that I need to focus on much. You know, my life is work and work is life. That's how it is set up for me now. And the biggest thing I had to let go of is that there is no separation between work and life, and that I had to create now my life, and that's separate from work. And that means taking on less opportunities, saying yes to things that just don't align with the North Star for my business, and that's Vocable now. And then the North Star for my personal life, and that's starting a family and really seeking that stability. I think for me, I thrived on being able to just get up and go, right? I had nothing else holding me back. If I want to go to Bali tomorrow, I can do it. If I want to go speak at this event in Singapore, I can do it. I love that. You know, it's a great sense of freedom and flexibility that I feel like people really want in their lives, but then it comes at a cost. So then I had to reevaluate again. So because I'm doing this kind of like get up and go, I'm not able to sustain and foster any kind of connections for a longer time, because I'm always hopping between my business, running my business, going places to hire people, going places to speak on events, taking on other partnerships and opportunities that come my way. And a lot of it is coming my way now, especially the more I feel like the more I'm in the public eye around AI, the more things are on my desk about like, oh, this is an opportunity, I should do it. And now I'm realizing, all right, well, that's all great and amazing. And I'm sure there will be more of those opportunities coming in at the right time. But right now, my time is going to be focused on just two major things. And that's why you said, I feel light, because it's so relieving when it just becomes, it's so simple. There's just two top things that I need to focus on.
It's completely changed you.
Yeah.
Energetically, like, it's completely changed you. I can't even describe how much it has changed you from someone looking from the outside in. Like you're different. You're floating rather than walking. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of how you present yourself now, because you know the goals, you know what has to happen to make those goals, and you know the space that has to be created in order to allow certain things to be present in your life. And now that you're clear on that, it's easy when someone says, hey, would you like to go and speak in Singapore next week? Well, no, because that doesn't actually align with my vision for my greater self right now. Like, yeah, of course it's an opportunity, but it's not your opportunity. It's not conducive to what you want to do now. Yeah. And I think I said to you openly, honestly, I've been in Dubai 3 months. That conversation was one of the most beautiful things, so to speak, that I got to witness, because I saw how much that could change a whole person's trajectory, just predicated on a few words of like, from the outside looking in, this is how it looks. And then you realize it's like, wow, you know, that's a change. I want to touch on AI to finish, because you know, AI is obviously a massive part of what you do. Now, I watched a talk that you did where you programmed, and you basically had sat down, you'd filmed yourself, you'd done some talking, this, that, and the other, and then you used it to like create this whole AI avatar that could then spit out like thousands of different variations of ads and, you know, like AI avatars type thing. Walk me through that whole process of that and how people can implement that in their business and what that is all about.
Yeah, so I'm assuming, I think you're talking about HeyGen, which is a software that I used. So it's pretty simple. It allows you to instantly create an avatar of yourself. So you're cloning yourself. You can just film it on your laptop if you want to, or if you have a professional camera. So you sit in front of it very straight up, and then you record yourself saying random things, right? Maybe telling the camera about yourself for 2 minutes. It's a very short video, and then you upload that immediately onto the software. It takes about maybe a couple minutes for it to clone you. And then once you're cloned, then you have that as an avatar in your account on HeyGen that you can then use to create any kind of videos you want, whether it's educational videos, you can create Reels, TikToks, and all you have to do is feed a script to that avatar, and it will just kind of take it, it will lip sync it, and then it would just create the video for you immediately. So you don't have to actually film yourself every time you're creating a video. And this works really well, especially for the format where you're just providing like educational videos with stuff on the background, or the green screen in the background, and there's you at the bottom kind of showing people something. So that works really well. Or when you're explaining a process, so you can have the split screen with your avatar at the bottom, and then your, you know, process of, let's say you're talking to people about how to create their journaling thing in the morning. So it's very good for that type of video where you're really just providing a quick 20-second value-based content, And that way you're able to churn out more content without having to film yourself every single time and edit it, and then, redo it and all that stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, and I like the way that you've used it to save so much time, because you can also use it to put into your SOPs. Like, say you did loads of video SOPs in your business, and you're doing lots of there's lots of screen recordings. You could use that as a presenter at the bottom of that, so that your face is on it,
exactly.
and things like that, right?
Absolutely. There's so many use cases for it. So, again, as you get more and more comfortable with using that avatar, and by the way, it's just getting better and better. So most people can't even tell the difference that it's me or my avatar, which is wild. And we're at the very early stages of the whole AI cloning and AI avatars, frontier. So it's gonna be used for a lot more use cases than we think. I think actually now a lot of people that I follow on Instagram that are, creating a lot of tech educational videos are using their avatars. I mean, for me, I can kind of tell because I've been doing it for a while now, but most people can't realize the difference between someone and their AI avatar, especially when it's like a small little one at the bottom and it's not really the focus of the video. So there are so many use cases where you can use it for TikTok, Reels, for educational tutorials, like you were doing a Loom video. There are so many more that are going to be coming out too, because I also recently created a different avatar that I cloned myself with. And that is actual interactive live avatar of me that you can FaceTime and have a real-time conversation. So there is no script, there is no pre-recorded video there. It's as if you called me and we're having a one-on-one session.
So is there a way now that we can feed in, say, all of my podcasts, and it can say, what questions should Frankie ask on this podcast, or could you ask the AI a question about any podcast I recorded and it answer in my voice and things like that? Is all that
Absolutely.
possible now?
Yes. So this one, the interactive AI avatar, you can absolutely do that. So you can feed it all of your podcasts, any YouTube videos, any books you've written, any content you've created in the past, or any source of knowledge that relates to your expertise. And that's the training data basically. And then you record a video of yourself like this, you clone yourself through that video, and now you've set up your clone to be accessible to people to FaceTime or video call it in real time and ask it any questions from all of your podcasts, all of your content, anything else that it will know, but it will know way more than that because it's also trained on billions of, parameters. And so that's an easy way for you to set up a customer support or an audience, expert, or audience social engagement expert that people can just FaceTime and ask questions without you having to be involved. But it will answer as if it's you. It will have your voice, your face, your knowledge, all of it.
So how long would that realistically take me to set that up? Sounds like
I did it in less than a few hours. Everything is instant now. We're way past a few hours. We're way past the days where you had to go to a company's studio and them having to do a 360 scan and video, recording of you, and then wait like 2 weeks and then they send you the first version. No, we're way past that. Now you can clone yourself instantly with this technology. So you will have it in a couple hours, not even.
I need to do this.
Yeah.
I need to clone myself so the audience can, literally FaceTime and get any information on any podcast that I've put out in the world.
You'd be surprised how many people use my avatar actually now to ask her questions. And the cool thing too that I think would be even more valuable, especially for us because we create content for our audience, is that you can then on your back end, on your dashboard, you can take a look at what questions your audience is asking your avatar. And that gives you an idea of what people are asking about the most, so you can create content around it.
It's even like this. So it's even like I could ask my avatar, go and find every clip of where in the podcast I've talked about relationships with anybody and give me all the timestamps, and it would come back and give me all the timestamps, and then I could go to my video guy and say, hey, get all those timestamps for all those relationship clips, put them into what like Lewis Howes does, these long videos on like how like relationships, and he'll do a whole long video on money, and he'll do a whole long, go and put it into a 10-hour video on relationships, and let's whack that on YouTube, go put that into a 10-hour video on money. And it's just like all these things I'm thinking about that can be done with this technology that can even help the creator, not just the end user as well. And the whole time, you just keep feeding it with more and more videos, more and more information. It's learning.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun part about AI, and that's one of the reasons I absolutely love being in this space. It's, there are infinite possibilities of what you can use it for. I think the challenge people are facing is that very few have the patience, the curiosity, and the creativity to really come up with use cases that will benefit them with AI. They're almost like waiting for other people to tell them how to use AI instead of being like, okay, you know what? I know AI is possible. I know AI is capable of doing all this stuff. But here's what I struggle with. How can I use AI then to solve for that problem? And you do that for one problem that becomes a use case that you're happy with. You're like, oh, thank God I solved that issue. And then you become more and more comfortable with doing it across the board, whether it's your personal life, whether it's your day-to-day tasks, workflows, booking your tickets, doing your groceries. I mean, I used to have a few hours dedicated on Sunday to just meal planning, figuring out the groceries that I need to get, go into the grocery store, getting them, all that stuff. Now I use ChatGPT. It creates the whole plan for me, gives me the ingredients, and it's connected to my Instacart, and it sends it directly to Instacart. And within an hour, my groceries are in my door. So it took me 10 minutes to do it on ChatGPT, and then it's delivered an hour later. And that saved me 4 hours. And same thing with tickets, you know, like you look through all these tickets or like comparing prices and doing all this stuff. Now you're able to automate a lot of that. The issue is most people don't have the patience to figure it out for themselves, because everybody's case is going to be a little different, because we all have different workflows. We all have different processes in place. We all have different lifestyles and, you know, flow of tasks. And so the first step is to be able to know what your task flow is and see where AI can take over most of it, and the rest you can take on yourself. But that still saves you at least 2 hours, 3 hours a day.
I can't wait till we can get to the stage where we can fire a whole unedited video and all the angles and everything into AI. It'll design you an intro. It'll do this. It'll do that. It'll cut it up into 17,000 small clips. It'll do everything. It'll post it for you. I can't wait till we're at the point where it'll do that. I can't imagine we're more than 12 months.
That's like we are.
We're nearly there, but it's not the right level yet.
No, but yeah, exactly. So that's what you have to think of. AI being like automation and, you know, streamlining processes and repetitive tasks. And then for humans, you can't lose the strategy and the context, right? The human will always bring context and strategy to the table. But then AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting and the repetitive tasks, which is good. But with agentic AI, it'll take it even a step further, which is, I think, now the next frontier we're stepping into. But with agentic AI, it will come up for the flow of tasks for you. So the model actually comes up with the flow of tasks. You just give it the objective and the goal. Right now where we are, we're still in workflows, we're still in AI chatbots and Copilot. So the humans are needed to set up the workflow and the framework, and AI executes within that framework. Where we're going is agentic. So agentic will come up with that framework for you, execute within it, and take over most of the process. You just have to give it the goal.
Yeah, and with what they're signing off in the US at the minute, which is this, what's it called, Sky something AI, have just signed off where OpenAI is being given an executive order to implement this certain type of AI that's like gives you all your details on everything about yourself right the way through, and implementing it right the way through America. I don't know if you've seen it. Have you? No, it's Sky something. The name's gone out of my head, but we'll move on. But Stargate. That's it. Stargate.
I know about that. That's the new initiative that President Trump is investing in. $500 billion.
Yeah. But if you read what it can do, it's going to be a madness.
Yeah. I mean, there needs to be a lot more compute power, data centers. Now we're stepping into a whole new level of AI where.
But that was the most worrying executive order I think that's ever been signed off in the entire history of the world.
It's also needed where we're at.
Well, we'll see
about that.
We'll see how needed it is.
Let's revert back next year, 10 years from now.
When we've got Tesla robot humanoids charging at us, powered by this, we'll see if it's needed or not. Then, I wanted to include. I'm including a new question in podcast now because I want to make sure that I capture all of the guests' insights. And the question is, if there's something that you've ever wanted to say on a podcast or something that you've ever wanted to talk on but you've never been asked it before, what would that topic be, and what would that bit of information be that you give on the podcast?
A topic I haven't been asked. about, but I want to speak on.
Yeah, or something you want to say around, any topic, but you're not usually asked about it. I'll tell you the reason I recorded the podcast the other day, and I asked a similar question. It was a bit cleaner than the one I've just asked, but basically he started to talk about fatherhood. Mm-hmm. And it unlocked this whole deep conversation on fatherhood that I just think is so valuable for people. And I wanted to see if there's anything that you've never spoken about that you've always been called to speak about.
That's a tough one. I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit, but there's just this idea of how feminism might have been, maybe.
Did you buy into it?
Yeah, I definitely bought into it, and I buy into it to a certain level. But I don't know if I want to call it feminism anymore, right? Because there's a few waves of those. But I also see how detrimental that can be to women who are also wanting that life and that stability and that dream of being a mother. And I know for me, I never thought I'd be at a point in life where I'm going to say, oh, I wish I planned for this better early on in my life, because I've always been so proud that I focused most of my 20s and early 30s on building my career, and I won't change it. But I do wish I had been more honest with myself to say, well, the environment I'm in right now is great for all these dreams and goals I have, but it's not conducive for the motherhood dream I want. And that probably would have saved me years being in the wrong relationship and then ending up obviously not with the guy anymore, and starting over in my mid-30s. But I stayed in that relationship longer than I should have, because I didn't have that raw conversation with myself, that I wasn't getting the biggest thing I wanted out of a relationship, and that's settling down and starting a family. Yeah. And I lied to myself thinking that it's going to come later. We're just not ready. It's going to come later, only to find myself in the exact spot I feared I'd be in back when I was 25.
Yeah, and I want to just urge, like, every woman that listens to this podcast to have that conversation with herself about, there's nothing. I want to be clear when I communicate this. Like, I want you all to pursue your entrepreneurial dreams and do whatever you want to do in whatever platform you want to do it in, right? I want that for you. But I also want you to have the honest conversation about, if you want to be a mum and that's something you have planned to do, how far, like, at what point do you allow yourself the space to do that? Because you need to allow it. Because if you say you want both aren't, mutually exclusive. You can't do both in a lot of cases. And I think when you've come to the conclusion on it, you've allowed yourself space, and now it's not too late. Now you can rectify that and you can move forward. Whereas I think a lot of women are potentially being misguided and missing the boat. And then if a man says anything about it, he's demonized, because he's trying to like potentially put women down, and you should empower females. No, I'm trying to empower them, but I'm trying to empower them with the right information that allows them to make a decision for their life, that allows them to map it so that they can go and take all parts of it, but without staying in one arena too long, so they miss the other one.
Right. It's more about being very active in taking control of that process and really plan for it. I wish I had planned for it the way I planned my career and the way I planned my next move and the way I planned my next business, and to me, that was always number one priority. Again, I think this is also, for me, was always this kind of immigrant mentality, right? Where I needed to just prove that we made the right decision coming here, that my parents didn't sacrifice everything for nothing. So I had this kind of fire in my belly that just drove me all the way to that extreme side. But listen, I'm not saying I regret it. I love every part of it, and I have really been so proud of the stuff I've done and built at such a young age. But again, I won't lie to myself and say, oh, I wish I hadn't completely been passive in that part of my life where I felt like I definitely had moments where I realized that, okay, maybe I'm ready now. Maybe at 26, okay, at 28, at 29, I'm ready to think about that part of my life. I'm ready to think about motherhood. I'm ready to think about starting a family. I'm ready to settle down and create more stability than, the usual travel and schedule. But I didn't bring it up and I didn't really voice that because I felt like, oh, it would just come when the time is ready, or when he's ready, he'll let me know. Or I kind of almost gave away that control and power to an external force. Then now I'm looking back and thinking, wow, I'm so good at being in control of my career, but then I wasn't as good at being in control in my personal life. And so that definitely helped me switch kind of my perspective on how to be more active in that planning process. And, it's a learning experience.
The reason I'm so proud about this conversation is because none of the other podcasters that I know that are slightly ahead of me or on the same level as me right now would even touch on these points because they're too afraid to be demonized behind having an opinion on it. But the actual truth of the matter is that, if a woman decides she doesn't want to be a mother, that's fine. But 90% of women out there if you're actually really honest, do want to be mothers, right? They do. And there's nothing wrong with that either. And to be able to have this open and honest conversation and dialogue like we've had on this podcast and off the podcast too, and actually realign yourself predicated on what your truth is rather than what society's pushing you towards is very powerful. I think it's going to shift a lot of women, especially on this conversation.
And it's so hard for someone like me to also have that and speak on it in a vulnerable way too, because I built a brand and it's not that it's not inauthentic, but my whole brand is around, pushing women to do more with their careers and being able to achieve whatever they want and go after their dreams. And that hasn't changed because I'm doing it and I will always be doing it. But I also want to stop and take a step back and also remind women that if you have that dream of also starting a family and being a mother, that it's okay to also make time for that and create space for that. It won't take away from the brand you built around being entrepreneurial and ambitious, but it's also a very important conversation that you have with yourself first so that you're pulled into the right direction early on. Not now. I mean, I'm now 36, so I'm basically now also reevaluate a lot of my choices and it's also like a relief, as we talked about.
I don't want you to demonize your choices. The choices are the choices, and they've led you to this point. Ultimately, that you're led to the conversation that's probably going to shift the way you change, and you'll have everything you want by the time you're 39, 40 years old and 38, and then it's all cool anyway. Nothing's been lost. But the reason why this conversation is so powerful coming from you is because you've gone from the pageant life. You've been Miss New York. You've built the media company. You've sold that. Then you've built the AI company, and then you'll also sell that. So and you've been on stages all over the world. This is why it's so important that someone like you did speak on this, because no one else is going to speak on it. No one else is honest enough to be able to sit in the world and vulnerable enough to be able to sit down and have this conversation.
Yeah,
I don't think, because I don't hear this conversation a lot. I hear people. I've even seen very, very articulate women speak on podcasts about chasing the entrepreneurial dream. But I also know from speaking to them off a podcast that they also feel the same way as you. Right, but nobody's seeing their true self, which I think just by you introducing this topic and seeing both sides, I think it allows women a whole new sense of reality that perhaps not available to them. So
absolutely,
I just want to commend you for that because it's a lot to talk on. I love to ask this question at the end of every podcast because I think it allows you to really contextualize everything in your mind. But if there's one pearl of wisdom, one little piece that you can give to every piece of this audience today that will move them 1% forward in their life, what would it be to you?
I will share my mantra that I have, that I tell myself almost every day, every week, is everything that you lose makes space for everything that you need. And I think that phrase helps me navigate the world with much more faith, much more trust and level of surrender that I didn't have before, because I think the reason why most of us are held back is because we have some kind of fear, like fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss. But just remember that whatever you lose, you didn't lose. It's just actually making room and creating space for the thing that you actually need.
I love that. And I just want to say to you guys, Well, I want to say to you, man, like, thank you very much for coming on the podcast for a start and being as open and honest and vulnerable. I know some of the topics that we talked about today are quite hard for you. You've probably never expressed anything like this in content before. So I just want to commend you for that. And guys, do me a solid favor. I believe this conversation at this time is one of the most important conversations to have in this space. If you could put it in more people's ears and make more people watch it, you know, that all helps just spread this message, because not only is it going to give you the entrepreneurial insights and everything that Iman's built, but it's also going to give you the other reality check on the other side of it as well. I think it'll be profound in a lot of women's lives and a lot of men too. So thank you very much for your time, guys. And as always, much love.
Guys, I hope you got value from this podcast. And if you did, hit that subscribe button and turn the bell notifications on. But guys, I've got these videos here that will take you to a whole new level as well. So don't sleep on these.